This is my switch. I don't want it to be a switch anymore. Okay, let me give you some context. The Steam Deck runs Debian Linux, specifically its own SteamOS. What's interesting about this is that the Switch can also run Linux, Ubuntu, which is also Debian. The theory here is pretty simple. You get Steam on the Switch, and you find some way to get the Steam Deck UI on there. And if you think this plan is pretty foolproof, you're about as naive as I was. To even begin to fathom how to get Ubuntu on our Switch, we first have to hack it. I have a day one Switch, so mine is guaranteed to be hackable. I know that because mine's actually been hacked for several years. This isn't really a Switch hacking tutorial, so the gist is that I'm going to put everything onto this SD card. What I'm going to do is insert this little RCM loader that I bought, which has a payload that will allow me to boot into different things before the Nintendo Switch operating system even starts. To get the Nintendo Switch to even accept one of these payloads, we have to put it into RCM mode. To do this, we short a couple pins on the right Joy-Con rail. I have a little jig that does this for me, but the first time I did it, I used a paperclip. Now, RCM mode doesn't really change anything on the screen, but once we insert the RCM loader, we enter cool as hell mode, or whatever. First, we had to partition our SD cards so that we could fit the installation files on one small partition, and then have those installation files create a much bigger partition where the system lives. I tried creating this manually through Windows. It didn't work. And as a bonus, it took forever, too. Turns out, I forgot to put the payload on the SD card with everything else, as well as I did my partitioning wrong, because the Switch is supposed to do it for me. Speaking of, I got the latest version of the payload, and I went to the SD card partitioning tool. After that, it was time to grab our Linux files, this time the, right way. After doing everything the right way, you'll notice that I'm merging bootloader folders instead of creating one. Apparently that was important. I was finally able to get Linux Are you fucking... Okay, so apparently I missed a very vital step, and it should have been fairly obvious, but I forgot to flash Linux, so that's cool. After finally doing everything, the way it tells you to, instead of the way I wanted to, I dumped my Joy-Con Bluetooth data, and I finally, actually, booted into Ubuntu. After letting it take its sweet time to boot, which, fair enough, it's a Switch, it was actually pretty impressive seeing the touchpad work immediately. The setup was pretty straightforward too. I accepted the license agreement that I definitely read, and I had to log into my Wi-Fi, which you don't get to see. Once I was done with the setup, I was booted right to the desktop. Now, as you can imagine, this keyboard is miserable to type on. So I went to go set up a VNC server or RDP or something, just so I could mirror and control the desktop. I am not willing to admit how long it took me to do this. The original idea was just to use VNC server and VNC viewer, because that's the thing I knew the most because I own Raspberry Pis and that's what you usually use for those. Apparently, those don't support ARM. Or at least, they do support ARM, but their ARM-supported distributions only support Raspberry Pis. After that, I tried to install XRDP. That also didn't work for some reason. After that, I tried using Chrome Remote Desktop. Guess the result of that. Okay, quick rant. You can install the Chrome Remote Desktop client onto the ARM processor. It shows up. It's like a desktop icon. It works. You open it, you click download to share your remote screen, and it just sits there. Why? You are Google. Can you not put if ARM, then say nope, can't do that? Clearly that is too much effort for your engineers to put into this, but anyways. Apparently, Gnome actually... Okay, I'm sorry, I'm very embarrassed now. Apparently, Gnome starts with Vino server. It has it, pre-installed. So, I could just use that. Once I got connected using Vino server, which I had to do some extra stuff for, I docked the Switch and connected the HDMI to my computer so I could record it, and now I could control it with my computer and record the raw video output. Now, I had a feeling this wouldn't work, but I tried it anyway, and I basically just went to the Discover store, tried to install Steam, and obviously it didn't work. Do you remember when I offhandedly mentioned that the Switch is running ARM when I was trying to install a VNC server? See, Steam doesn't really support ARM architectures, only x86, which ARM is obviously not. Now what I could do instead was install something called Box64 or Box86, and basically run Steam through like an emulation layer. Sounds easy, right? Yeah, that's what I thought too. Until it was 2:48 a.m. After fiddling a little bit more with the whole regular Steam installation, I ended up looking for Box86, and I found this repo. Now, I didn't quite understand what Box86 was, nor did I really want to compile it myself, so I was kind of glad that I found this Debian package. This was the first of many mistakes. After installing a bunch of packages and adding random stuff to my path, I still needed to install the libraries that Steam required. I ended up copying a sources.list file with a bunch of these x86 packages, which got me farther, but not really anywhere close. Now really quick, I want to make sure everybody knows here that everything I've been doing so far has been so wrong. Like not at all what you're supposed to do. In fact, everything that I had done up to this point had like broken the system so bad, I had to reflash it. After reflashing the entire system, which you can tell by the fact that the name has changed, I went through the actual L14 instructions. Yes, apparently they had instructions to install Box86. Given that the instructions were basically just copying and pasting commands, it was fairly straightforward. To start, I had to install a bunch of stuff. Then I had to build libepoxy and Virtual Renderer. After that was just a bunch of chroot stuff. Basically, chroot allows us to create like a separate root folder for like another part of like subsystem or something. What we end up doing with that is using something called dbootstrap, which will allow us to install, quote-unquote, the ARM-HF architecture, which Box86 supports. Now, ARM64 is obviously 64-bit, while ARM-HF is 32, so they don't quite work like the exact same. However, using this whole fucking thing, we're able to run them properly. After hitting Control-C and Control-V a shit ton, and waiting for the poor CPU of the Switch to compile full C projects, I was finally there. I could open Steam. Well, kinda. See, one of the tricky things with Box86 is that it doesn't actually work properly with the way that Steam renders most things, which is through Chromium and HTML. The solution was to use the minigames list, which clearly wasn't working. I did remember, however, that Box86 actually had a script for installing Steam specifically, so I had no option but to try. And it worked. Actually, I could log in and I could see my games list. It worked. I had spent hours and hours upon trying to just get Steam open, let alone anything happening, and so this was such an accomplishment. So with this newfound success, I installed Binding of Isaac and FTL, hoping that one of them would open. I undocked my Switch, excited that I'll finally be able to play a game mobily, like a Steam Deck, like the whole goal. And upon attempting to... nothing. I have now spent hours of my life trying to get Steam and any game, anything at all, running on the Switch. FTL is not a hard game to run. My phone could run FTL. The Binding of Isaac, the Switch has a Binding of Isaac port. It's not hard to run, but here we are. The Switch cannot be made into a Steam Deck. Kinda. Okay, here's the thing. We're gonna try something a little bit different. Do you remember back at the very beginning, I was showing my SD cards? One of them was marked with AN. That SD card currently has an installation of Android on it for the Switch. In a desperate attempt to get fucking something, I googled Steam Deck UI Android, thinking someone must have made a launcher or a theme or something based on the Steam Deck. And it turns out someone had. I found a Reddit post about someone who was developing one a year ago, and I looked for any way to get a hold of it. Apparently, releases were only in their Discord as their GitHub was not public, so I went and downloaded it, and this is what it looked like. First, I had to obviously insert the SD card and boot into Android. Side note, I have this really cool Switch cartridge SD card holder thing because I switch between them so much. Anyways, I began the boot up to the custom Lineage ROM that was installed, and I waited. Immediately after booting, I decided that I should probably clean it up of its malware before I get to actually using it. Now, once I knew that it was clean, I had the deck UI installed, and I was actually kind of impressed. It detects apps that are labeled as games and lists them as games in the deck UI, and then you can access other ones in other menus. So now the final test was here. Can I play Steam games? Now the obvious answer is no, you cannot. However, you can stream them to the tablet using Steam Link. After getting Steam Link set up, which is really quick by the way, I was able to stream Slay the Spire from my computer to my Switch. Now obviously I know that Slay the Spire is a bad example because there's a mobile port, but still. And that actually brings up another very important point. Vampire Survivors, 20 Minutes Till Dawn, Slay the Spire, these games are all PC games that were ported to mobile. And so if you wanted to play those games, this is a very, very viable option. Even then, the Switch, with or without Android, is a very good emulation tool. You can play anything up to, I think, like the PS2. So while the original goal of this video didn't exactly pan out, I think we got a pretty kind of okay approximation. I mean, really, it's got all the features of a Steam Deck, except that a lot of games aren't really played from the Switch. Like, even being able to dock it and play it docked is pretty impressive. I mean, I guess to close this all out, I don't think we succeeded, per se, but I'm pretty impressed with our result. I hope having watched all this, it doesn't really make you feel cheated. I promise I tried my best. But, I mean, with what we have, I'd say this is pretty alright. Well, thank you. I appreciate you sticking all the way to the end. I know we went on a bit of a roller coaster, but I think the final result was kind of cool. Feel free to stick around and subscribe. I do things sometimes, and I often like to document them. But, it's up to you, and I don't exactly have, like, an upload schedule. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a college class in the morning. So, good night.